I'll kind of get us started with, I think, which is one of the favorite things when we first found out you were going to be joining us, is like, Dr. Hartman, you live next to a church parking lot.
Do.
How has that motivated your interest or your research? How has that influenced you becoming interested in this topic?
Thank you for the question. That's a great one. So I honestly have always been interested in parking lots because I've always been interested in transportation as a moral and ethical issue. Um, and I had in the back of my mind to do some project that relates to church parking lots in particular because I'm trained in the study of religion. So I feel like maybe I can speak to people of faith about parking lots. And then 6 years ago, my family was shopping for a new house and we decided on this house, and lo and behold, it was right next to a church parking lot. So it felt like a moment of providence. I thought, okay, it's time for me to get more deeply into church parking lots in particular. So that is why. And I will tell you, there are some good things about living next to a church parking lot, but mostly it's not a positive experience. Looking at historical records, I'm aware that the church that's near me um, bought and then destroyed a house, actually two houses, to create the parking lot that's just adjacent to where I live. And so sometimes I feel like there are ghosts, right? I feel like there's the ghost of a house or two houses that would have been my neighbors, right? And I like to imagine, like, who could have lived there? I could have had neighbors. Maybe they would have been annoying. I mean, there's that, but probably they would have been great, you know? And having neighbors is a good thing to have. Um, or alternately, it could there I started thinking, right, about all the things that it could be besides a parking lot. What would I like to live next to? The parking lot itself, we get a lot of wind because there's nothing blocking the breeze. So our front porch is always like things are always sort of blowing off the front porch. We have to watch out for that. And it gets very hot in the summer. It's not particularly shaded or anything like that. So in the summer we get that urban heat island effect. It heats up hugely. Um, it is a shortcut for pedestrians. We're not in a real walkable area, but it's a little bit walkable. And so there's a convenience store on the far side of the parking lot. So we get people like, I see them walk through the parking lot and then they walk back with beer. So, there's that. So there's a little bit of action. It's a Pokemon Go stop. So sometimes
Mm.
people drive in, do Pokemon Go, and like they get out of their cars every now and then. I like, what's going on? Why are all those people? Oh, it's probably a Pokemon Go event. They have special events certain days. So yeah, and the church itself has the occasional event there, like a trunk or treat,
Mm.
which you all probably have. I have many thoughts about trunk or treats, which we can go over if you want. So that's what it's like to live next door to a church parking
Okay, yeah, yeah, and I live in a very car dependent place. A lot of I have a, there's a lot of mega churches in my neck of the woods, with large parking lots, and I think a lot of people on this call, when we see these parking lots, we envision what it could be, just like you talked about. Do you think churches see it, or do you think on any level, do they see this opportunity as an opportunity lost or wasted, or you think the majority of folks just aren't seeing it?
lot. Honestly, I think a lot of church people are not particularly place focused. Um, I mean, even the church buildings are sometimes considered an afterthought and a burden, right?
Mm,
Not to mention the outside of the church. And
mhm,
so I think to try to get people who are attending these churches to think about their place as a site of responsibility and as a site of expression, a site of evangelism, a site of like where you can make good things happen. It could be a positive thing on the outside. I think that's a stretch. However, there's a subset, I would say, of people within these different churches and denominations that definitely think about property, in particular, and how do we steward our property well. Many, many, many mainline churches are diminishing in their membership, right? And that's part of, the parking lot next door to me is never full, never.
mm.
Okay, like not even on Christmas. And so
Yeah.
um, And so and they're not alone. There are all of these churches where the membership is diminishing, and so the use that was previously made of that parking lot is no longer needed, right? And that may be true of the whole building. So there are definitely organizations that work on that, and that are trying to help churches either grow or find alternate uses for their building and their property, um, or envision what could happen after they're gone. There's
Mm,
this book which some of you may be familiar with called Gone for Good, and it means it literally, like, your church might be gone and it would be for good. How
mm,
how can we move past the current use of church property towards something that's better. And there's this really cool organization actually called Rooted Good, um, that has like a consulting service where they attempt to help churches and larger denominations look at their properties and think about how to transition towards something that's maybe a little more consolidated for the membership, and then the unused properties can do something better.
so it seems like, and you might have you probably have your finger better on the pulse of this, so you're a great person to ask. It seems like the Yes in God's Backyard movement is at more of a beginning phase and increasing in momentum
Yeah.
phase. And so you're saying that if church membership, church attendance is going to be permanently lower, there's an opportunity
Mhm.
in to take something that, yeah, a church would probably see lower membership as a negative thing, but use that as an opportunity for a positive. What sort of positive opportunities are available for churches? You can talk about housing, but are there any other opportunities for church property?
Yeah, well, and something I want to make really clear about, and when in I'm I have a manuscript for a book about church parking lots, and something that I try to say in there is that you can not need your parking lot as much and still be a thriving, growing church. It's about how people get to your building, right?
Mhm,
Parking lots are a gateway to talk about car culture, right? And to question whether that's something that a community of faith wants to support or not, right? I mean, I think it's Graybar in Paving Paradise where he says something like providing parking is like giving drinks to a drunk person, right?
mm,
Like you're just
mhm,
making the problem worse. And I think many communities of faith have not really paused to think about that, but to think about car culture, to think about whether they want to support it, whether they are providing a supply of something that they should not be supplying, or at least not for free, right? If you're providing free parking, are you not also providing free bus passes? And why not? Right? Those should
mm,
be roughly equivalent, assuming you have bus service on Sunday. We don't
yeah,
in Roanoke, right? And so, but this is an opportunity, right? I mean, churches can advocate for things, especially those big mega churches that you live near, right? I mean, can you imagine, right? What if they took seriously the idea that they wanted fewer people to come to their church by car? Okay,
mhm.
that's a major voting constituency. If they showed up at city council and requested sidewalks, bike lanes, bus routes, don't you think they would get them? They will, right? And then imagine, because you got hundreds of people coming to those locations every Sunday morning. Imagine them all coming on foot, right? I mean, how inspiring and beautiful, right? To have all these like pilgrims on foot coming, or buses, disgorging like hordes of people, right? Imagine all the bicyclists coming to the church. And yeah, okay, if it's a rainy day, they would all have umbrellas, and it would be beautiful, and you'd have little towels in the sanctuary, like in the vestibule when they enter, right? Or if it's a hot day, then like everybody would get sprayed with the hose before they come in. They get all rinsed off, and it'd be like an extra baptism. Like, these things can be fun, they can be community building. Like, getting to church in a way that is communal and collective is
Mm,
much more in alignment with Christian values and the values of other religious traditions as well. Um, so whatever your congregation is like, if we travel to our place of worship in a private space in our cars, then we've lost an opportunity, right? To reach out to the neighbor, to love the neighbor, to be present in the place, to walk. it there's this metaphor that Christians use a lot, right? A walk of faith. What is your walk of
mm.
faith like? Well, if you never walk anywhere, I don't know what kind of walk of faith you have. You know what I'm saying? Like, how can we even say we have this if we're not walking? And so,
Mm,
um, I think it's important to think about different uses for this property, for the parking, um, in conjunction with getting your congregation to do something different. They can even park 3 blocks away and walk in, right? Now, some people can't, to be super clear, right? I'm not saying like somebody who has a disability, maybe they're very old or something like that. Like, yeah, some people need to like have that curb service and drive right up there. And people who don't know any better didn't realize they maybe didn't have to drive to this place. You need some visitor spots, right? But
mm,
for the regulars, for the regular congregation, to issue this challenge, can we carpool? Can we make it a goal as a congregation to reduce our use of the parking lot to, let's say, 1/3, right? If we can
mm.
keep our parking to 1/3 of the lot for 6 months running, then we all get something special, some kind of prize, right? Maybe
Yeah.
every time we reach that goal, then the choir is going to sing an extra hymn, right? Or if we get there, like if we get there 3 months in a row, then the youth group is going to bake us all cookies or whatever. Like there are ways to
Yeah.
sort of create these incentives to carpool slash find other ways, and
Mhm.
then you've got room to dream, right? Then you've got this space that you don't need to store your 2 tons of private property per person, right? You don't need that. And that space, I mean, I love the name of this movement, the Yes in God's Backyard, right? There's one thing I love about working with churches is there's not so much, or at least there shouldn't be, so much a sense of personal ownership, right? This doesn't belong to me, it doesn't belong to us, it belongs to God. Okay.
Mhm.
And so then you can say, okay, what is God's business? What does God want to have happen here? And so you appeal to your moral values, and so affordable housing is huge, right? You do get it's a nascent movement, but you are getting many congregations saying we need to house people. This is a ministry. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, there are tons of other things you can also do with that space. I argue in favor of parks, greens, and green space.
Mhm.
Every square inch of this beautiful creation wants to be a forest or wants to be a prairie, wants to be, if you leave it alone, right? If you leave any piece of land alone, it's going to become something. And so, from a
Mhm.
theological perspective, it was created to be that. And when it does that, when this forest pops up, it is praising God. Okay, that's that theological perspective. So if you're going to keep it from praising God, you better have a doggone good reason, right, to pave that over. You better have
Yeah.
a really good reason. And I
Yeah.
just think most people don't consider it because they have this viewpoint that the only valuable use is to make it easy for people to get where they need to go. Easy?
Mhm.
There is no religion that says easiness is a spiritual goal, right? Like you're
Mhm.
supposed to have a somewhat hard life. Yeah, you're supposed to
Yeah.
sacrifice a little bit. That's good for you. It's good for all of us. So, uh, so why not let it express its natural beauty and become a forest or something like that?
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
and then a playground or a site. It could be a shrine. It could be a labyrinth. It could be an outdoor classroom. It could be all kinds of things. There's an opportunity to dream, and I would encourage congregations to ask their neighborhood what do they want in that
Mhm.
space. Maybe they want a coffee shop. Maybe they want more housing. What does the neighborhood actually need?
Yeah, and folks, if anything's kind of popped into your head as we've been going back and forth, please put it in the chat. Questions are more than welcome. I got a big old list I can ask from, and yeah, I mean, I would like to just steal like 2 hours with Dr. Hartman and just pick her brain, but yeah,
I
um,
could talk about this for days. Can you imagine? People,
yeah.
I'm real fun at parties, let me tell you.
Hey, same here. Like I go down these trails and then people are like just slowly backing into the door. And I'm like, oh, I've done that thing again. I said I wouldn't do. Sorry. So but one thing I was gonna ask is what this reminds me of is kind of our schools, how we've lost the neighborhood school in place of the large school on the outside of town that then doesn't really connect with the neighborhood well because these people are coming from far away. Do you think that's a similar comparison to some of our churches?
Yes. So in times past, when we didn't have as many transportation options available to us, um, if you were going to go to a church, you were going to go to a church nearby, probably someplace you could walk to, right? Because maybe driving wouldn't have been available to you. That has changed with the advent of the automobile. Um, and it has ushered in, I mean, honestly, if we didn't have automobiles, we wouldn't have had this big shift in churches, which is to say from the parish church, it's called the parish model, to the consumer model. So the
Mhm.
parish model is you go where what you're to the church that you're close to. The consumer model is you shop around, right? You try this church, you try that church. Well, I like the music here, but I didn't like the preaching, and you figure out what fits for you. um, there are many advantages to that, to the consumer model, right? Because uh, you know, honestly, like churches can be kind of oppressive in the best of times, right? And so if you can find one that's like not too much burden on your soul, then like that's a good thing, right? You can find one that actually fits what you're looking for,
Mhm.
but it comes at a cost. Because then that you as a member of the church are not as committed to that neighborhood because you went to a different neighborhood to go to church. Um, and then the church itself, if it's made up of enough people who don't actually live in that area, then there's a risk that they can become very disconnected from the neighborhood, right? It's a commuter church,
Mhm.
where people come in, do their thing inside the walls and leave. And so again, people are in private space the whole time. You're inside your private car. You park in the relatively private church parking lot. You walk into the church building, do your thing, and then reverse, right? You get back into your private car and you go back to your private home. And so there's no this is a problem for churches that claim that they want to like spread the gospel or that kind of thing. There's no interface with the neighborhood there, not really.
Mhm.
Um, so the alternative is a church that is more engaged with the neighborhood. This is a spectrum, right? So some churches have a little bit more and a little bit less. But to the other extreme, the deeply neighborhood engaged church is one that truly doesn't need a parking lot, because everybody can either walk there or bike there because they live so close, right?
Mhm.
Um, and it's deeply involved with the neighborhood, because there's this exterior orientation, and because as a member, my process for getting there is I'm walking through the neighborhood as I get there, and so I'm paying attention to what's around me, to the needs and so forth of the neighborhood. And then when I leave and I'm all full of enthusiasm, right, I'm going to be taking that joy into the neighborhood as I
Mhm.
walk out of it. And I mean, it will have an effect. How many people I smile at on my way home from church, like there's ripple effects. You're going to be having
Mhm.
that impact on the neighborhood, depending who the people are who are in the church and how they get there and how they get out. But again, churches tend to think of most of what they do as inside the building, and that's it.
Yeah, and like you almost said, I think you mentioned at the beginning, the building almost becomes a burden in itself. Like it's like becomes about the building and about supporting the building and making sure people
Hmm.
can get to the building. And it's like, hey, aren't we supposed to be like impacting? And it doesn't matter what religion you are. Every religion is like, hey, I want to impact my greater community. Like that seems to be a pretty standard thing.
Yeah.
And so we had a few things come into the chat. Joanne said there's a great opportunity for churches to rent out underused space to the public as a stream of income, and
Hmm.
that's actually a question I had. So I'll kind of blend them together. But yeah, outside of this ethics, moral argument for what are we're talking about like an income stream. Are there any other pros outside of just the ethics and morality of it?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, doing something else with your property can absolutely be a stream of income. And a lot of the churches that do the housing thing, it can be, you have to work it out properly. They often work with a contractor, or no, a developer, I should say, to develop their previously parking lot into some low income housing, and then figure out what level of rent to charge, right? I mean, obviously if you charge a higher rent, you're going to make more money, but if you want to do something charitable and kind to the community, you want a lower rent. And so there's a it can be a little bit of a finesse, but hopefully there is a way to charge a lower rent and still make enough money that it's an income stream for the community. But also there are churches, depending where you are, right? There are churches that just straight up rent out their parking,
Yeah.
during the weekdays or something when they might not be using it for a worship service. So like churches near big universities, for example, there's a huge demand for parking in those areas, so they can make a pretty penny. And if they're using it for their missions or whatever, I see the value.
Yeah, and even that right there, a church that's next door to, let's say, some restaurants or a coffee shop
Mhm.
or a place where people, gather. But that place, as we hear with Parking Reform Network, a lot of stories of places that can't exist because of parking issues. Well, a church says, "Hey, we're only packed on Sunday and maybe Wednesday
Yeah,
night.
right.
Can we work together with this business to help them meet their parking quota so this business can continue to exist?" And hey, now you're influencing the local community in a positive way. So yeah, you got my brain turning a little bit in a good way. And so Wendy asked a question. She said, "I started to think that free parking creates ambiguous loss, i.e., the space is both available and unavailable for everyone to use. How could this idea be included in a Christian context?"
Yeah. Um, yeah, thank you for that. That's such a great insight. Um, so I guess one thing that I want to say is that maybe the parking lot is really needed on Sundays, let's say, right? Um, it doesn't have to be unavailable for community use the rest of the week. It
Mm,
wouldn't work to make it a forest like I was describing. Like that might not work. But there are other uses of the lot, like weekday uses or whatever that could be compatible with it. So there's this great book called Church on the Move by Travis Norvell. And this book is about Judson Memorial Baptist Church in Minneapolis. And this is one of those rare, amazing churches. It is um, a medium-sized church in a large city that has no parking lot,
mm,
and it's not in the urban core. It's in a like a 1920s-ish suburb, or I don't know if suburb is the right word, but it's in a 1920s-ish neighborhood of the city. Um, in that book, Norvell suggests that churches that do have parking lots should consider them to be a plaza. Um, he says that parking can be like a wall, that it's just sort of a barrier between the neighborhood and the church. But instead, he wants churches to think of it like a bridge. Okay, and that this parking lot can help people to become comfortable near the church, right? Like churches always want. Oh, thank you. Yes, that's the book in the chat. Churches always want new members, right? Like this is a whole thing, and so to let your parking lot be a welcoming space is a step in that direction, right? Once people get comfortable hanging out in your parking lot, then maybe they'll come into the actual building and then maybe you can talk to them more or whatever. And so there are things that can happen when you think plaza, okay, you think public space that is available to all, kind of like a third space, these really wonderful public areas where there's, I don't know, some tables and chairs, maybe. There's some potted plants. There's I don't know, a place for people to play basketball. There's maybe a little like sculpture or something that's interesting to look at. Or do you know what I'm saying? Like, and there are ways that those things can coexist with parking, such that when there's no cars there, then people are happy to hang out. And then when the cars come, they don't. So um, I think that there are creative uses of the space that can build those bridges with the neighborhood, um, and really, from a church's perspective, like reel the people in, like get them in there.
yeah, I mean, it sounds like it really does behoove the church on like multiple levels to undertake some sort of like element of public space, whether that be eliminating cleaning the slate for housing, or like you're saying, like parks or plaza. I know, I live in a very rural area, and almost every church parking lot has a basketball goal.
Yeah,
Whether you can
yeah,
play on it or not, so it's almost like they got the facilities, but they're not letting you know if you're allowed to play there or not. Or is this just for church people on church days? And so it's like, hey, even just as simple as like a signage that said,
right.
"Hey,
Yeah,
free play as long as there ain't people parked here. Go ahead."
yeah,
And so
yeah,
which reminds me of like schools. Schools have tracks and playgrounds and football fields and those shared use agreements with the community, making sure everyone legally feels good, everyone knows the rules of the road when it comes to using the space, can then invite the community in, and you didn't spend a dollar. All you did was make it official with legalese and signage and stuff like that. So there's a lot of opportunity there that isn't going to cost people crazy amounts of money. to get done, and churches are going to benefit, like you're saying, in these multiple ways. And so, getting to the article again, like Pastor Rosenthal mentioned how this was a big pivot from building a new church. And I know a few friends that are pastors or youth pastors that church building is some of the worst part of their job is the fundraising and the stress and hecticness of it. So that sounds like a pretty huge thing for a pastor to do is pivot away from a church building plan to do this affordable housing instead. Um, could this pivot be an appealing model to other churches who also aren't into building a brand new expensive building?
I'm not sure about that because I think it's a different kind of project.
Mhm.
Um, if you think you need a new expensive building, then building something else wouldn't solve whatever problem you were trying to solve with
Yeah.
your new expensive building. So I'm guessing that he was able to rethink the need for a new expensive building, which is fantastic right there. You know, the greenest building is the one you don't build, right? I mean, when it comes to environmental concerns. Um, but you know, in looking into the Yes in God's Backyard movement, I did find an article that does like a survey of I think about 100 of these projects where people are building specifically affordable housing in church-owned properties. Um, and they do run into a fair bit of red tape, right? I mean, there's the zoning issues, but there's also pushback from the community, right? If you're in an area where maybe people are afraid of low income people, right, and you're building affordable
Mhm.
housing, then you're going to get some pushback from the community. They're going to find a way to say no, we don't want this. There may even be trouble with parking minimums, right? If you're trying to build a multi unit apartment complex or something, you know you might need to have sufficient parking according to your zoning and to make that happen. So I think there's plenty of headaches from what I can tell to trying to do this, and this is why people work with developers and stuff. But that's also why there are movements, as I mentioned in Texas, there are movements to cut down on the regulatory challenges to doing things like this.
So Tim brought up a good point, which is something that I was thinking about too when I was reading through this article, which is generally, churches are privy to certain privileges when it comes to tax exemption, and so he mentions that these tax exemptions to other legal privileges, they're justified by their mission and social good in the community. If they persistently leave land unused, possibly their right to this special dispensation might be challenged legally, legislatively, or morally through advocacy. Have you seen or heard of any examples of something like that?
You know,
Yeah.
people leave churches alone. I mean, and this is part of their strength, and this is why they really should use their powers for good. Churches and other communities of faith generally are seen as virtuous actors in any community, and so if they're not using their parking lot as we would wish them to do, no one's going to call them on it. I mean, they kind of have carte blanche to do whatever they want, I think, in most communities. But the flip side of that is then if they do want to build that affordable housing or something, they have at least some powers of persuasion. You know, the community is going to maybe push back, but ultimately they can play that moral trump card and say, we are a church, or, you know, we are a community of faith. And so, you know, we are trying to do good. And, you know, would you have us not do good? You know, there is that kind of argument that you can make in response.
Well, and that's one of the big questions I want to ask you today because I mentioned this at our last Park and Read. Is I'm always looking for a new argument to do a thing, and so sometimes it's an economic argument, sometimes it's a ethical, moral argument. Since your world is very much the ethical reason we should do the thing, the moral reason we should do the thing, in your evaluation of that argument, how effective is the moral, ethical argument in your opinion?
Well, it depends on your audience. Um,
Mhm.
so it is it is my belief, and you will find a whole bunch of people of faith who will agree with this, although a vocal minority don't. But I think the majority of people of faith would tell you that that there is a rival religion in this country, and that is the religion of economics and the market and profit. It doesn't have one name, but I think you know the constellation of ideas that I'm talking about.
Oh,
The base.
I read that paper. I read that whole paper.
I wrote about
So
this, and Vinny
this
actually
is
read my
this is how
articles. I'm
bad,
so impressed.
this is how like desperate I am for information and like just the
Well,
biggest nerd. I read that whole
yeah.
thing and was really interested in it. So anyways, keep
Okay,
going.
so this is my argument, right? That the market in some form or another acts like a religion. It tells us what's right and wrong. You know, what's right is making a profit, and what's wrong is, you know, losing money and being inefficient, right? It tells us who we are as people. We are consumers and we are profit maximizers. It tells us what is our ultimate goal, right? Not heaven. Our ultimate goal is to buy all of the things or whatever, you know. And so this is a set of ideas that adds up to something like a religion. It tells you what to do at every level of your life. But almost every, what I would call almost every legitimate religion disagrees with that. Okay. You have, I mean, in every religion, you get teachings about money, right? And about how to handle financial things, how to handle economic concerns. And almost all of them, right, are saying things like care for the poor, be generous, don't hoard, you know, don't maximize profit if it means harming people, right? I mean, so this is the moral argument that religions can make and arguably should make. Now, I mentioned that there's a pretty vocal minority of faith communities that actually don't seem to be pushing back against that religion of the market, right? But instead are merging with it, right? So you have your kind of prosperity theology that's saying, well, we're supposed to be rich and we're supposed to make money, and there's nothing wrong with maximizing profits, and et cetera. And uh, so I don't, you know, I can't say that all religions are going to tell you not to maximize all your profits, but I think that most of us are thirsty for an argument that pushes back against economic arguments. Um, Sometimes economics can be used in service of what is morally good, you're right? So that's fine, you know, cheers to that. But I still want us to watch out, because that's not the ultimate reason why you want to do a thing. I think you want to do a thing because it's right, because it aligns with what you think is true and right and good, not necessarily just because it makes money. If it makes money, that's sort of a sweetener, right? That's the sugar that helps the medicine go down or whatever. Um, so how persuasive are these ethical arguments? Again, it depends who you're listening to, or who's your audience, right? Because if somebody is completely in thrall of this, what I consider this other religion, then yeah, they're not going to listen to you because they believe in a different God. Um, but if you can build that bridge, right, and say, no, you know, we believe in the same God, or we have similar values of some kind, it doesn't have to be God, but you know, something like that. If we agree that people who struggle need to be supported and get help, if we agree that we should be good stewards of our land, if we agree that connecting with a neighborhood is better than not connecting with a neighborhood, you know, some of these kinds of things, you know, then maybe those moral arguments do have some persuasion. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm trained as an ethicist, but I try to have a lot of humility about my own profession. It doesn't do that much, but we try. You know, it's another reason that can maybe tip the scales if someone is trying to figure things out.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a really great place to leave it. I feel like that was a nice closing piece. Um, will you tell folks again about your book and how they can, you know, if you mentioned maybe, you know, needing a little bit of assistance with some of these pieces, you want to kind of toss that
Absolutely.
out there one more time before we get out of here?
Yeah. So I'm in the process of writing a book. I have a full manuscript, but I don't have a publisher yet. I sent it to a publisher and I haven't heard anything back. So who knows? It's only been like 5 weeks now, so I'll give them a little more time, but who knows? Anyway, so if nobody wants to publish it, I'll try to just make it available on the website for download or something. I don't even know. But my point is, it's still in kind of the writing phase. It still can be revised. So I would love to have examples of churches that are doing good things with their parking lots. I would love to have examples of you know, maybe other perspectives on things that you can talk about when you talk about parking lots, etc. So um, I'm also very happy. Um, I'm very happy to share my draft with anybody. Like, I don't care. I have tenure. So it like I don't have to publish this in a way that is somehow maximizing the good for someone else, right? Like I'm just trying to get my ideas out there. So if you want to see a copy of my draft, I would be happy to share it with you. I'm putting my email in the chat. So anybody who's interested, just hit me up with an email. Either give me ideas and information or ask to see the draft, and I'm happy to share it with you.
Okay, excellent. I love it. Well, y'all know where to how to get a hold of Dr. Hartman. Uh, thank you again. This was great.